Hello and welcome to another episode of Katie the Science Lady. Today's topic is natural selection, so let's learn together.
All right, so today we're talking about natural selection. So evolution and natural selection are really closely linked because natural selection is one of the mechanisms by which evolution happens. Remember, evolution is change over time in a population. So we're looking at change over millions of years in a population of organisms. So we're not talking about every single flamingo on the planet, but we could have flamingos in one area that over millions of years could evolve and change to the point where they have new adaptations and all sorts of new interesting things happen. So natural selection is going to play a role. We already talked about evolution being a process by which we're changing characteristics over time. And natural selection was proposed by Charles Darwin in the 1800s. And it's a basic mechanism. It's not terribly complicated, but it is one of the kind of primary ideas that we base all of our evolutionary ideas off of. So we're going to move along with that. This is a picture of Charles Darwin. He was a scientist and researcher that lived in England, and he formed a lot of his ideas based on a voyage that he took to the Galapagos Islands. And at the Galapagos Islands, he observed many different species of finches, different populations of finches, which are small birds. And he noticed that they had a lot of differences. And he was trying to figure out, why do they have all these differences? They live in the same area, but there's all these different kinds of finches. So what would have caused one finch type, the original ancestor of the finches, to create all these different new types of finches? And they all had different beaks and they ate different things. So he was trying to figure out why that would be. And you can see here some of the finches that he studied. Some of them are bigger, smaller. Some have really large beaks. Some have very small beaks. And we'll talk about his finches a little bit more as we get into this process. So there are a couple of principles that we have to understand in order for natural selection to be occurring. The first thing, genetic variation exists. We have variety in life. No matter if it's in a human population, we have lots of genetic variation. Some people are born with genetic diseases or genetic conditions. Some people aren't. It can be something as simple as some people are born with freckles and some aren't. You can't really see my freckles, but I am born with freckles. And there's all these different variations that we have: skin color, eye color, hair color, height. All these different things are variation that exists in our populations. And some of these genetic traits directly affect our fitness. This is a huge key of natural selection, the idea of fitness. And fitness is a measure of our ability to survive long enough in our environment to reproduce. So in evolution, in natural selection, in biology, it's not enough just to survive. If you want to, as I call it, win at biology, you have to survive and reproduce. Because when you reproduce, you're passing on your traits to the next generation. And that's the whole point. So our fitness, the different degrees of it, that is a variation. And it leads to some of the members of our population being more biologically fit for their environment than others. Now, when I say fit, I don't mean it's the biggest or the strongest animal. Sometimes it could be the fastest. If you're the fastest bunny rabbit, you're probably not going to get caught by predators. So you're going to get to survive and reproduce. So being quick would be very helpful. Being a bigger rabbit wouldn't really help you if you're slow, because you're going to get caught anyways. If you're more intelligent for like an animal, maybe you avoid a trap, or you can avoid a hunter or something like that. It just depends. If coloring could make a difference. If you are a white moth and the forest you're in has mostly dark brown trees, you are going to be very visible to predators. So you would want to have a darker coloring to be fit for that environment. It just depends on the environment. Some traits can be fit for one environment and not for others. So it really just depends on the surroundings and where that organism lives. So here we've got a peacock. These brightly colored feathers are actually attraction for their mates. So they are trying to attract a mate so that they can reproduce. If they do not have as pretty of colors or they don't have as many feathers, the female peahen may not be attracted to them. So these are actually the males. People forget that peacocks are males, and they're trying to attract a lady by being flashy and pretty. So if they can't reproduce, it doesn't matter. They wouldn't be fit for their environment. Here we have an octopus. An octopi can blend into their environment so they can camouflage themselves. And that the ability to camouflage can make them fit for their environment because they can hide from predators. For example, these fishermen grab this octopus probably out of a net, and it's trying to now hide from them by blending into the color of their deck, which is a pretty good option for that octopus. Another principle of natural selection is the overproduction of offspring. We don't see this all too much anymore with humans, but we see it constantly in the animal kingdom. The fittest members of a population produce the most offspring. So if you are the prettiest peacock, you will get to mate with the most peahens and have the most babies because you're really fit for your environment. If you're the fastest bunny rabbit, you may be able to have more bunny babies because you'll have a longer time before you die. It's kind of one of those things where it's life and death here. But that's what we're looking at is the more fit you are, the more chances you have to have babies or offspring. So that's really what we're looking at here. More offspring are produced than can survive. Not every single baby, no matter if it's human, animal, if they're born, not every single one survives. It's just a sad fact of life. For humans, some babies are born with conditions that cause them not to live very long, and that happens. It sadly means they weren't very fit for their environment, which is a terrible way to look at it, but it's the case. And this happens a lot with animals too. Sometimes even dogs or cats, if they have a large litter or just a number of offspring at the same time, if some of them aren't really fit for their environment, they may not survive. The mom sometimes eats the babies. So if the mom knows that they're not going to survive, she might eat them or abandon them. That happens a lot because the mom needs to devote her attention to the offspring that will survive. Again, it's a sad fact of life. None of this has to make you happy, but it is the case. So we've got it's easier to talk about with plants because we don't have emotional connections to plants. But over here, all of these seeds, those are technically offspring that will be going off to try to reproduce. So all these little seeds here, some of them will spin around. Those are like the helicopter seeds. I don't know the actual name, but they'll spin off the tree and some of them will find good land to reproduce. Some of them won't. And the ones that don't just won't survive. Maybe they didn't have as good of a spinning mechanism. Maybe that little wing wasn't perfectly formed. So that trait will get lost. The ones with the perfectly formed wings will get to reproduce. Over here again, we've got turtles. So we know that if you've ever seen Planet Earth, you may want to go watch this or maybe not. Sometimes when turtles are born, there are predators that are ready to go eat them. So you may want to be the fastest turtle. You may want to be the sneakiest turtle. Whatever helps them get into the ocean and survive is a good thing. And not every single one of those turtles is going to survive. One or more of them are going to get caught by predators. So overproduction of offspring just is a fact of life. Not everything can survive. Another principle we're going to talk about is descent with modification. And it's kind of a tying together of everything here. Every time we have a new generation, if a trait makes you better fit for your environment, it will get passed on. If a trait makes you not fit for your environment, they tend to die out. This is the case if, let's say there was a crazy mutation, hypothetical, and it turns a bunny rabbit bright blue. This is not a thing that would happen, but bear with me. If it turns a bunny rabbit bright blue, and the rest of the bunny rabbits are all white and they live in the snow, that blue bunny rabbit is going to stand out and it will get eaten. So that trait, that mutation that caused the trait, that blue fur one, will die out because that bunny rabbit's not going to get to reproduce because it's going to get eaten most likely before it has the chance. So the traits that help you be more fit will become more prevalent or more common and traits that make you less fit will die out, because if you're less fit, you don't get to reproduce as much. Over really long periods of time, this can change the characteristics of our population drastically. Over time, all the peacocks that had the colorful feathers, if you don't have colorful feathers, you're probably not reproducing. That's why all of our peacocks now have really beautiful plumage, those pretty feathers with all the different colors. And that's what we see. It's very hard to find a peacock without those feathers. I don't even know if they exist anymore, honestly. So it can change those characteristics a lot. Here's our another example here. This is bacteria. So kind of prevalent now, or kind of useful now. COVID is a virus, which is not a bacteria, but this is kind of similar. So if we have a lot of bacterial here, most of them are normal. One of them is resistant to antibiotics. We're going to go ahead and say, okay, this person has a bacterial infection. Let's give them our normal antibiotics. So the majority of those bacteria are going to die because they're normal. They're not resistant, so they're going to die due to the antibiotic. Now, maybe one normal bacteria survives, just kind of either randomly or for whatever reason, so it gets to reproduce. But then our resistant bacterium, because it's resistant to antibiotics, also gets to reproduce. So now you've killed off all the normal bacteria and you've let just the resistant bacteria survive and reproduce. It's stronger. So now if you try and use that same antibiotic again, it doesn't work, or it only works on the normal bacteria. And you'll have an entire population of resistant bacteria because you overused your antibiotics. So they will tend to survive. Here we have an example of bacteria and different types of antibiotics. This entire circle here, this petri dish, is covered in bacteria. So you can kind of see the swoop marks of that bacterium being deposited. So that light kind of haze here in between, that's bacteria growing. So bacterial colonies are these kind of this hazy white part here. These bigger white chunks, those are antibiotics. This is how we test what types of antibiotics will work against different types of bacteria. Over here on this plate, we have normal bacteria. It's killed by all these antibiotics because we can see these clear spots where the antibiotic is killing the bacteria. So this is normal bacteria. Over here, we can see that we've got some resistant bacteria. Around this antibiotic, no bacteria are dead at all. They are still fully growing. Same with this one and this antibiotic as well. So it's showing that our bacteria on this plate is very resistant to these antibiotics. It's pretty resistant to this one here and this one here, and it's barely resistant to these other antibiotics here. So this plate overall is showing us that we have resistant bacteria, and that's how they do test this kind of stuff.
All right, so let's recap what we've learned today about natural selection. Natural selection is a mechanism of evolution, which means that it allows evolution to occur, or it's a process by which evolution happens. And what it really means is that some members of a population are more genetically fit for their environment than other organisms. This means they have some sort of advantage over the others, whether they have a trait that's beneficial or they have a behavior that's beneficial. Something allows them to survive better in their environment. If they can survive better in their environment, they get to reproduce. This is the goal of biology. The goal of biology is to survive, but more importantly, it is to reproduce and pass on your traits. So if an organism can survive long enough to reproduce, they have won at biology. Well, that's it for us today. Please like, subscribe, and comment to my channel for more biology videos. And as always, I hope you had fun, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you later.